Carl Jung argued that a man's psychological death occurs the moment he subordinates his own vision to the emotional comfort of others. When you prioritize a woman's advice over your own internal compass, you're often trapped in the Puer Aeternus archetype, the eternal child who refuses to grow up and take responsibility for his own reality. This dependency is a form of psychic umbilical cord that has never been severed. In depth psychology, the process of becoming a man requires a second birth, which is a transition from being a subject of the mother's world to becoming the king of your own. Every time you ask for permission or look for a green light from a woman before taking action, you are essentially retreating into the nursery, signaling to your own unconscious that you do not trust your own strength. This dynamic often stems from what Alfred Adler identified as overcompensation, because you fear that your raw, masculine drive might be too much or harmful. You overcorrect by becoming hyper-agreeable. You use a woman's advice as a filter to ensure you remain safe and likable, but the cost of this safety is a loss of your telos, your ultimate purpose. A man without a self-determined purpose is like a ship without a rudder. He may be a nice person to have on board, but he is incapable of steering through a storm. Jung observed that women in a man's life often subconsciously lose respect for a partner who cannot hold his own frame, because a man who can be easily swayed by her advice is a man who can be easily swayed by anyone. He lacks the diamond body of a fixed, indestructible core. Building on this, we must look at the hero dragon myth that resides in the collective unconscious. Joseph Campbell noted that the hero must often leave the protective feminine to slay the dragon of his own fear. If the hero stops to ask the princess how he should fight the dragon, he has already lost the battle. The advice you seek is often a hidden form of resistance, a term coined by Stephen Pressfield. It is easier to talk about the plan, seek consensus, and gather opinions than it is to actually execute the mission. By involving a woman in the granular details of your strategic decisions, you're often just looking for someone to share the blame with if things go wrong. True sovereignty means being willing to be wrong alone rather than right by committee. Furthermore, consider the Anima projection. When a man has not integrated his own inner feminine, his intuition, his emotions, and his creativity, he looks for these things in the women around him. He treats them as an external oracle. This is a dangerous misstep in individuation. Your partner is a human being with her own biases, fears, and subjective reality. She is not a mystical guide designed to navigate your career or your life's mission. When you ask her for advice on matters that require penetrative logic, risk-taking, and assertion, you are asking her to play a role that is biologically and psychologically taxing for her. You are essentially forcing her to be the man in the relationship, which inevitably leads to a collapse in polarity and a rise in resentment. The nice guy syndrome, as described by Dr. Robert Glover, is the ultimate manifestation of this problem. It is built on covert contracts, where you follow her advice in exchange for a feeling of security. This is not love. It is a transaction rooted in a fear of abandonment. If you don't do what she says, you fear she will leave. But paradoxically, it is the man who is willing to be left, the man who is so committed to his own path that he will walk it alone if necessary, who is the most grounded. Stability doesn't come from agreement. It comes from outcome independence. When you stop listening to the noise of external advice and start listening to the signal of your own conscience, you develop a gravity that others can lean on. Finally, we must address the warrior archetype versus the pleaser. The warrior does not seek consensus. He seeks victory and order. The pleaser seeks to minimize tension. If you are constantly seeking a woman's advice, you are feeding the pleaser and starving the warrior. In the long run, this creates a shadow of repressed aggression. Because you have given up your power to make choices, you begin to resent the person whose advice you followed. You blame her for the outcomes of a life you didn't choose for yourself. To be a whole man, you must accept the burden of your own mistakes. It is better to fail on your own terms than to succeed on someone else's. This is the path of the king, the one who listens to his counselors, but never lets the counselors wear the crown. We must also confront the false persona that is built when a man operates solely on external feedback. D.W. Winnicott described the false self as a defensive structure designed to please the primary caregiver, originally the mother. When this persists into adulthood, you don't actually exist in a relationship. Only your performance exists. You seek advice not because you need information, but because you are performing the good man. This performance is a slow-acting poison for intimacy. A woman cannot truly love a man who is merely a mirror of her own suggestions. She is looking for a solid boundary to lean against, not a shadow that disappears the moment she expresses an opinion. Shutterstock. This brings us to the concept of psychological reactance. When you outsource your willpower, you inevitably begin to feel a subconscious urge to rebel against the very advice you ask for. This creates a passive-aggressive cycle. You ask for her input, follow it half-heartedly, and then subconsciously self-sabotage the result so you can prove her wrong. This is the hallmark of the immature masculine. A mature man understands that the highest form of respect he can show a woman is to listen to her perspective deeply, weigh it against his own internal values, and then make the final call, accepting 100% of the responsibility for fallout. Furthermore, consider the law of polarity often discussed in modern evolutionary psychology. Masculine energy is traditionally characterized by direction, presence, and mission, while feminine energy is characterized by flow, radiance, and emotion. When you ask a woman to provide the direction for your life, you are forcing her to occupy the masculine pole. This biological role reversal creates an immediate drop in sexual tension and attraction. You are essentially asking her to be your navigator while you sit in the passenger seat. Over time, she will develop decision fatigue and a deep-seated anxiety because she feels she is the only one holding the structural integrity of the relationship together. This reliance on external advice is often a symptom of what Jordan Peterson describes as a devouring mother archetype. It is a part of the feminine that protects but also smothers, preventing the child from facing the harshness of the world. By constantly seeking consensus, you are staying within the walled garden of safety. But the world outside the garden is where the rewards are. A man must be willing to face the chaos of being wrong, being judged, or being isolated. If you are afraid of a woman's disapproval, you will never be able to face the world's disapproval. You remain a captive of the social contract, rather than a pioneer of your own destiny. The erosion of the masculine ego begins with the small surrender of the will. When you ask, "What do you think I should wear?" or "How should I handle my boss?" you're training your brain to prioritize external harmony over internal integrity. This is what Jung called psychic entropy, the degradation of your own psychological energy, because it is not being directed by a centralized ego. To counteract this, you must enter a period of voluntary isolation, where you make decisions, even small ones, without consulting anyone. This builds the ego strength necessary to hold your ground when the stakes are higher. You cannot lead a family, a business, or even yourself if your foundation is made of other people's opinions. Finally, we look at the individuation of the will. True character is forged in the silence between receiving information and making a choice. If that space is filled with the voices of others, your character remains soft. To build the diamond body, Jung spoke of, you must endure the pressure of making difficult decisions in isolation. You must learn to trust your own deep, intuitive understanding of a situation. This doesn't mean becoming an arrogant loner. It means becoming a man who filters the world through his own soul. When you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start stating, "This is what I am doing," you move from a state of psychological childhood into the seat of the king.